Hello everyone, my name is Alex. I'm a 2000 rated over-the-board chess player, and in this series we're going from 1000 to 2000 ELO in chess.com rapid games, where I'll be explaining my thought process as best as I possibly can for your education and entertainment. Obviously we have already hit 2000 ELO, but I'm going to see if we can go a bit higher, and today we have a Caro Kann defense. You guys know I love the Caro Kann, but we're seeing a line that we don't see very often, with pawn to f4 on move 2. Now, pawn f4 is obviously designed to prepare the move e5 and have e5 supported by the f-pawn. That is clearly the goal of that move. And I believe the way that black is supposed to fight against this is by trying to punish white for not playing d4 and go for a quick c5. I'm just going to wipe my camera real quick. Because typically in the Caro Kann, black won't be able to fight for the dark squares in the center all that well, because white will play d4, and after d5, e5. A lot of the time people go bishop to f5 and focus on the light squares, or you go c5 anyway and kind of gambit a pawn to try and fight on the dark squares. In this situation, however, white gives us free rein to go c5, and you might be asking, Alex, why have you wasted two moves moving this pawn to c6 and then to c5? Isn't that just a waste of time? And you could argue that. You could also argue that white has wasted time by moving his pawn two spaces in the first three moves. And of course, white will justify his pawn movement, and you may be thinking this right now, by thinking, okay, yeah, but white moved his pawn a second time to avoid a pawn trade and to take more space in the center. Well, that's exactly what I'm doing. I may only be moving my pawn one square at a time, but I'm taking space in the center. That's the whole point. My opponent tries to challenge me immediately with the move pawn to c4, which looks incredibly strange. Incredibly strange. Of course, I would think we probably have two options here. I think pushing or taking. Now, we could defend this pawn with the move e6, but I don't really want to block my bishop in. And I think e6 just invites the move d4, and white blows the center up, and I don't think that's particularly beneficial for us. If takes, I only will take if there are tactics that work in my favor, because the white position looks very exposed. Let's say dc4, bishop c4, and queen to d4, attacking the bishop and the f4 pawn. There is one defensive move there for white that I can see that works. See if you can find it. And I believe d3 just holds everything together. The bishop is protected and the pawn is protected. And there we don't have anything. So I think I should push d4 instead. And this is, pretty good, because we take a lot of space on the dark squares, which, by the way, was the whole point of moving my pawn to c5. So I'm literally justifying my previous explanation in real time. My opponent goes d3. And this is a very interesting position, because this is not a very typical Caro Kann structure, right? You do have to be comfortable in any opening with going for something a bit unorthodox, especially if your opponent plays something strange, which my opponent has done. So knight c6 is one of the moves I'm considering. Another move is bishop to f5, just keeping an eye on this weak pawn. I think that I like the idea of bringing my bishop to the c6 square, because this is going to be an important diagonal. And you know what? I think I want to beat white to the punch. So if my opponent goes bishop to e2, which is obviously a natural move, and bishop, which he does, then I will go bishop to c6. And if he goes bishop to f3, which he does, then I can just continue my development. I have my knight ready to take on c6 if my opponent takes. And now I have to figure out what I want to do with the rest of my pieces. I could play the move e6. Now I'm no longer blocking in my bishop because it's already in the game. I could consider fianchettoing my dark squared bishop, although I think that it will be quite nice on the e7 square. I think that probably is where it belongs. Particularly if white will try to get a knight into e4 and d6. That's something I have to be aware of. My bishop is good just watching the d6 square for the time being. I also kind of like the idea of getting this knight to f5 via some means. So I think knight to h6 is the move I'm going to choose. If you've watched some of my previous Caro Kann videos as well, you will have seen me play this knight to h6 line, but only under a very specific set of circumstances. This is not memorization. This is an understanding of the opening, which is something that I preach in so many of my videos. The reason I like knight to h6 is because typically in the Caro Kann, the knight gets developed to the e7 square, and whilst the structure is a bit strange for a Caro Kann, it might not even be that good for me. I genuinely don't know. I think it looks good though. I've got a lot of space. A lot of the time, the pawn will go to e6, the knight will go to e7, and then it will develop from there. However, when f4 is on the board, there is a stark difference because the bishop no longer controls the h6 square, which means you have to spend less time developing your knight because you don't have to play e6 first. You can just bring the knight straight to h6. Also gives the knight access to g4, which can sometimes be a useful idea. You can often partner this idea with the move h5. h5 technically wouldn't drop a pawn because I'd be able to take on g2. But often when the knight comes to f5, you can follow that up with h5 ideas in the future. That is more so down to personal preference, in my opinion. And from f5, you can see how we might be able to exploit the dark squares, or even go like e6 and queen to h4, right? Because g3 we can just take. That's also another idea with the knight on f5 and the queen coming to h4 that we have seen in previous videos. Of course, the structure has not been exactly like this, but the way the pawns are on f4 and e5, we have seen this before, and therefore I'm applying similar ideas from those structures in my previous videos to this game. Again, understand your openings. Do not just memorize moves that can only get you so far, right? I've never seen this position before, or this type of position before. If I merely memorized my openings, I'd have no idea what was going on. And I'm sure, well, probably watching this, you'd have no idea what's going on, right? And particularly, the majority of you watching this video will most likely be under 1500 ELO. Your opponents will play all sorts of wacky stuff, right? Your opponents will play like f4 and then d5 and then e5 and after c5, I don't know, g4 or maybe not f5, just hanging a pawn. But you get what I mean? Like, they'll play some random stuff. My opponent playing c4 is arguably kind of random. Like, I've never seen this kind of thing before. So you've got to be able to adapt to the positions and not rely purely on memory. If you are finding this video useful so far, I'd really appreciate it if you could drop a like and subscribe if you haven't already. The channel is growing at an insane rate right now, and it's incredibly motivating, I have to admit. So really appreciate your guys' continued support. And if this is your first time on the channel, how's it going? So c5, we do have to potentially watch for b4 ideas, trying to undermine our c5 pawn. Now, that's kind of like a Benoni sort of thing. Like, this pawn structure is reminiscent of a Benoni. Whoa. Okay, that is ridiculously committal. Now, okay, this is actually crazy, because what I'm going to do is at the end of the video, I'm going to link another video on my channel, which I can't remember the name of right now. But like I was saying before, with this structure of f4 and e5, dude, this is so cool. And bringing the knight to h6, right? I was talking about ideas of coming into f5 and exploiting the dark squares alongside e6 and queen to h4, right? And in the video, well, my most popular video, actually, which is on like 45,000 views right now, which is nuts, by the way, this is the kind of structure that we had. Now, I think there was a trade on f3, maybe? There was some kind of trade, if I remember correctly, but my opponent played h3 in this structure, and we ended up punishing him on the dark squares, and I think our knight ended up coming to g3 and winning the rook, or something along those lines. So e6, I believe, should be the move. Just immediately threatening queen to h4. That's a big threat. That's a big threat. We are also preparing knight to f5 to try to exploit the g3 square. This position is coming together beautifully. Beautifully. And, I mean, why did my opponent play h3? I mean, maybe he was scared of a knight to g4 idea. Maybe he's trying to prepare the move G4, and take a ton of space, which, as I said, people will play wacky stuff sometimes. But yeah, knight to d2, and we just deliver a devastating check on h4. And white is probably just about lost after the move knight to f5. Because we're threatening knight g3 check, picking up the rook, and we're threatening knight to e3 check, picking up the queen. Like I said, this f4 move is so weakening. My opponent takes on c6. I will take back, of course, which just helps me in my development. Oh, that's an interesting idea. That's a very nice defensive resource from my opponent. I suppose I could have considered taking on f4, but yeah, okay, so knight e4 is a really cool move. So my opponent defends g3, and his bishop opens up to defend f4 and the e3 square. Now, I still think that my opponent is in a lot of trouble, but for the time being, he is defending himself. Knight to f3 is also on the way to kick our queen out. So we need to figure out how we're going to go about this position. A couple of ideas come to mind. Firstly is knight to g3 check. Just securing a knight trade and getting our queen a little bit closer into the position. However, queen to f3, and I'm not particularly sure what the plan is there. It seems like my opponent defends himself rather nicely. Maybe we can trade and go knight to b4. But I don't know. It seems like a little bit of a flimsy idea. What else can we do? What else can we do? There's no way to distract this bishop from the defense of e3. So can we try and distract this knight from the defense of g3? I don't really see a good way to do that. I don't see a particularly good way to do that. There's a bit of a crazy move, g5 here, where if pawn takes, then we win the e5 pawn, and if knight takes, then we can go knight g3 check. However, g5, I think, is just met with knight to f3, and our queen is hit, the pawn is hit again, and that just doesn't work. I mean, g5, knight f3, knight g3, take. You don't even necessarily have to take, to be honest. You can probably just move your king, because my queen is still under attack. So that doesn't really work. Okay, what else can we do? We could try and open up the position with the move f6. That's not ridiculous. And on knight to f3, queen to h6. But I'm not sure we really carry a threat there. We could go bishop to e7, just developing the bishop and preparing to castle. Then maybe f6 comes with greater threat, because our rook would open up. Bishop e7, knight g3, queen h6. The queen doesn't look all that comfortable. Even like g4 and f5 are maybe annoying. So we do have to be a little bit concerned about counterplay here. It's a very good find from my opponent. And again, I am wondering... obviously here I couldn't do this because I was in check. So I had to respond. Maybe taking on f4 was better, but I don't know, like knight to e4, that's not that fun. The queen has to move. I actually feel like I'm in trouble there. So, okay, we'll deal with the position that we've got. We could go knight to e3. Bishop takes, pawn takes, freeing up the d4 square for our knight. Queen to f3 looks logical, attacking e3 and defending f4. So here. If knight to d4 attacking the queen, queen e3. Well, there we have knight to c2. That looks very promising, actually. Literally just freeing up this square. Now, also, f4 is under attack. The knight to e2 is an interesting move. Defending f4 and defending the d4 square. However, this knight is stopping the mate threat on f2. So here, knight e2. Maybe we can, like, queenside castle and just put pressure on the d3 pawn. That looks very promising. That looks very promising. If knight e3, take, and knight to f3, then we just take on f4. I think I like this idea. And again, I have to admit, I'm not 100% sure on this plan, but it seems like a very interesting idea to castle queenside, get the rook on the... Basically, I'm trying to force the d-file open, because of course, white has to take my knight. There is no ifs or buts. White has to take the knight. And I'm trying to force open the d-file for my rook, and I'm trying to secure the d4 square for my knight, and also the e3 pawn could actually be a massive asset. Now, what white could do after the trade, so of course, bishop takes, pawn takes, is he could play the move g3, supported by the knight, attacking my queen and defending the f4 pawn, which he does. But I honestly wasn't all that concerned about this move. I felt like I had decent counterplay. Now, where is that counterplay, is the question. I could go queen to h6 and hang around the king's side, but it doesn't look all that impressive. I mean, the only other alternative is queen to d8, but then I'm stopping myself from castling queenside. And if queen e2, queen d4, there's knight to f3, and c2 is well defended. So queen to h6. If queen e2 going after the e3 pawn, castle queenside, queen takes, knight d4, threatening knight c2. Let's say rook c1. Again, it's unclear how I'm continuing the attack. But for the cost of a pawn... Oh, I have moves like knight to f5. Hitting the queen, hitting g3. d3 is under attack. That's an interesting idea. I think we have chances. My only issue is my queen just seems completely out of the game on h6. Like, it just seems like a terrible piece. Like, is it better to come to d8 first? I'm not sure. Queen e2. Maybe queen b6? Going after the b2 pawn. And if a move like rook b1... Queenside castle, queen here. Knight d4. Is that good? Maybe. Or maybe I even have knight b4 there. That's an interesting idea. I think I'm going to go for it. Which, yeah, I don't know. It's a very counterintuitive idea, and it'll be interesting to see what the engine thinks of this decision, but I felt leaving my queen over on the king's side just wasn't the play. I feel like I should have had a better attacking option at some point over the past few moves, but I just couldn't find it. I should have given the move g3 a bit more credit, admittedly. However, you know, I'm never going to play perfectly. I'm a good chess player, but, like, I'm not a perfect chess player. Okay, knight e2 is chosen. Not a move I placed much emphasis on, because I don't think it's particularly scary, to be honest. I have no issue with that whatsoever. Okay, well, I can't come here. I could go knight here. I'm not really threatening anything. If takes, then fantastic, but I doubt he's going to take. I could go knight to b4, applying pressure to d3, but I think my opponent can go d4 and get away with it. So I'm actually going to choose queen b6. And I like queen b6 because, one, I prepare queenside castle because I'm getting out the way. Two, I maintain eyes on the d4 square. So after I castle, if I play a move like knight b4, then d4 can't be played, which is why I'm not playing knight b4 right now, because my queen is watching d4 with the rook and with the pawn, right? Ooh, that is a strange move. Do I castle first? I think I should castle first. Knight here. Maybe just queen b3. Yeah. So I'm going to castle first, and now this is an actual threat because it's just a fork. So rook d1 seems forced, which my opponent doesn't play. So I think we're in a very good position now after knight to b4, hitting the queen and hitting the d3 pawn. We should just be going a pawn up. Now, one of the frustrating things about this position is that this bishop kind of sucks. However, you could see it in another light. Once we go bishop to e7, which is obviously where the bishop is going to go, then it will control the movement of this knight in a geometric pattern that I talk about a lot on the channel with the two pawns between the knight and the bishop. So the bishop performs good defensive duties. Okay, how are we going to win this pawn? Should we take with the knight or take with the rook? I think rook takes makes a bit more sense. Oh, wait, no. Then there's queen e8? That's... Wow, that's interesting. Okay, let's just take with the knight then. It's a very interesting idea. We do have ideas of queen to c6 if we want them, hitting the queen and the knight and forcing a queen trade, but of course it would damage our structure. Okay, rook h2 d1. I think bishop to e7 is probably one of the only moves. We are threatening the b2 pawn as well. Now there's no queen to e8 ideas because our rooks are connected, so that's not a problem. If this rook leaves the back rank, my other rook has got it covered. You could argue my knight is vulnerable, but it has an escape square on b4 for the time being. Also, I can go to f2 if I really need to. And yeah, I'll lose a pawn for the price of escaping, but that's, you know, better than losing a knight. This pawn is just so deep in the white territory, and it's unclear how white is going to win that pawn, which is pretty nice. I mean, you know, there is king to f3 ideas just going after the pawn, but for the time being, that's not particularly playable. Okay, rook a to b1, defending b2, because I'm obviously attacking it. Could I have done this? Maybe? I mean, it looks a bit scary. I mean, obviously, for the time being, I have this... I don't know. Maybe I should have gone for it. Okay, whatever. Mistakes were maybe made. We could just go back with knight to b4 and offer a rook trade, which looks logical. Rook trade should be in our favor. Again, this queen c6 idea is nice, but I don't want to ruin my pawn structure. I think we just get out while we can. Get out while we can. There are ideas of taking on b2 with the knight, even though there's a pin, because we have a fork. But I didn't want to get into the weeds of that. Okay, a3, which is a good plan from my opponent. I think we can bail out with queen to c6, which looks nice. There is knight d6 ideas. If knight c6, b4... Take. Can I take? Maybe just knight d3 check. Knight c6, b4. Oh my god. Take, knight takes. Knight takes so that if knight d6, I can take it. Preparing the move a5 to defend the bishop. Although maybe there's like sacrifices, I don't know. Is there anything wrong with this? I force a queen trade. King f3. Here. Take. Check. Here. I have no way of... Yeah, no, I think I should retreat. I think I should. I don't think b4 works. I think we're good there because we have 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces monitoring the b4 square. White has 1, 2, 3. And even though knight d6 check can be thrown in, I don't think it matters. Also, my queen now defends e3. Yeah, I saw this, but I thought we could just take it. I think. I mean, what are my other options? Queen a5? No, I think we can take that. Of course, it looks so scary to be opening up my king like this. It does look terrifying. But I don't think it's that bad. Well, I think we have to go for this move. I need to try and get my king to b8 because the c file has opened up and b5 is on the way. b5 immediately. I don't have knight d4 because the queen is controlling d4 along with the other two pieces. This is not a move I was particularly scared of. This gives me time. I can take, and if pawn takes, I can just shift my king. Probably. King over, b5, knight a5, rook here. Maybe my knight gets trapped? Is that the idea? Maybe. Here. What else can we do? We're up 2 pawns, but it's really not simple. King b8, b5. My knight just has no moves. Oh, this is really not fun. Do I have to do this? I might have to do this. I don't have time to calculate this all out. I don't want to ruin my pawn structure like this, but it seems like the most logical move because otherwise I don't see how I survive. But now I get my king to d7. This is okay. Now I can bring my rooks into the game. Yeah, this is okay, I think. Because I'm up 2 pawns. This is an idea. I also just have ideas of trading everything. Taking seems a little bit dubious. This looks decent. There's a lot of interesting lines here. Like, even rook c7 is an idea. If take, 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 I think there's knight to b5 discover. Well, double check, actually. And my knight will hang at the end of the line. Which is an interesting idea. Okay, this is less scary. There's always rook c7, which is the annoying part. I think I can take, though. I always have rook to b2 with check. Nah, this is fine. Is it? Knight check. Do I advance? I think I might have to advance. Which looks suicidal. But knight e2, I have king to d3. And if rook d1, I have king takes e2. This looks mental. We're just going on a mad king march, but my opponent is running out of checks. What is going on? Should I block? I think I should push. I think I should push. Okay. I'm really not sure. Really not sure, but I'm going to play this anyway. Just to protect my king from checks and also to preemptively defend. Try not to blunder any forks as well. Wait, I think we're potentially winning this. And even if I lose this pawn, I'm still up 2 more pawns. Well, that doesn't work. So I promote. The king has to take. Then I have check, picking up the rook. Wow. Okay. Well, that's GG. There's no checks. As in, like, there's no knight forks that win my rook somehow. Whew, wow. GG. Yeah, as you can see, I definitely had chances to win at an earlier point, which, of course, we will find out in the analysis. But what a game. I hope you guys enjoyed and learned an awful lot. What I'm confused about is in the opening, it felt like I had a much bigger advantage at some point and that I should have been able to exploit it a bit better. So let's see where that is. Okay, so e4, c6, f4, and d5. Of course, this is a strange version of the Caro Kann. My opponent goes e5. c5. Yeah, the computer prefers bishop to f5. And in a lot of lines, the computer prefers bishop to f5. I personally like the move c5, though. c4 is played. Interestingly, I should take and just go knight c6. Oh, so the computer wants to argue that d4 is incredibly weak, and that I have such a strong grip on it that I can just stop white from ever going d4. And this pawn will the computer literally wants to sack the pawn. It thinks that it's that dire for white that he should just sack the pawn and get it over with. But let's say the pawn goes to d3. The computer just wants e6? Knight f3? Knight h6, let's say castles. Bishop e7, let's say knight c3. And it wants to fianchetto, and it thinks this is much better for black. I can see why, considering how well we control the d4 square, but it looks a little bit unnatural, just to me. So I decided to push, which the computer wasn't a fan of, but okay, we have a good amount of space. d3, bishop d7. Computer's not the biggest fan of it, but it's clear what my intention is. Bishop e2, bishop c6, bishop to f3, and knight to h6. Computer wants f5 here, which, like, yeah, okay. If takes, then okay. All right, sure. Knight h6 is a perfectly reasonable move. And then h3 is a step in the wrong direction. I go e6, opening up the diagonal for my queen. Computer here wants g4, allowing this check, and going king f1. And it thinks there's no attack, which is pretty funny. But knight d2 is chosen by my opponent, which blunders the move queen h4, king f1. And yeah, apparently I should have just taken on f4. Admittedly, in retrospect, I was like, knight e4 looks a little bit scary, but I missed the fact I had queen takes e5. And I just eat the pawns. So I should have gone for that. Instead, I went for the second best option with knight to f5, and my opponent found the only way to defend the position. That is not where I was supposed to go. Let's go all the way back. The best way to defend the position, the only way, to take on c6, and after knight takes, knight e4, again the only move. Both of the threats are defended against. Here, I couldn't figure out whether to play one of these moves or play f6 or something along those lines. I couldn't figure it out. The computer does like the idea of knight g3. On queen to f3, it wants to go queen back to g6, which, to be fair, makes sense when you see it from this perspective, because d3 is a target, and maybe knight b4 in the future can go after it quite nicely. I instead chose to move knight e3, though, which is completely playable as well. Bishop takes, d takes, and the only move is the move my opponent finds, g3. Now, I was initially considering queen to f3, but I thought that after knight d4, you can't really take because of knight c2. So after a move like, I mean, what can you play? If you take, I thought I had, yeah, knight c2. So queen g3 is the other move. And then I can just queenside castle, and d3 is weak, and you still can't win this pawn back immediately. If if you take, I again have knight c2. If this, trying to look after the d3 pawn, I have knight b4 with a fork. Basically, white isn't developed properly. But my opponent went g3, which was the best move. Here, queen h6 and queen d8 are given similar, yeah, basically equal evaluations. I chose queen d8. Knight e2 is a mistake. I can't really explain this move. I don't understand why knight to f3 wasn't chosen. Couldn't tell you. But knight e2, we go queen b6, just applying general pressure. Queen c2, which I again couldn't understand, because I can just castle, and knight b4 is on the way. Here, I thought you had to play rook d1, defending the d3 pawn, and then play will continue. Maybe I just go bishop to e7, and you still can't really win this pawn back just yet. If you go queen c1, which I suppose you can play, maybe I can just double up, and you can't defend properly. If, like, knight to f2, knight b4, and because of my queen here, you can't really push. So the computer... Wait, no, I can't take this. Just comes back. Yeah, why is knight b4 a good move? I can just do this. Basically, I'll win the pawn back eventually, and I'll have sustained pressure. So, king g2 was chosen, which baffled me a little bit. Knight b4, queen a4, and knight takes d3. The computer just wanted to go bishop to e7, but that's not a very human-like move. So knight d3, rook h2 d1. By the way, I didn't want to do this because of queen to e8, rook d8, and queen f7. Computer finds queen c6 and says that it's fine because of there's knight c3, and I don't know, things get, not that. Things get very, very messy here. I want to have no involvement. So knight d3, rook hd1, bishop to e7. Computer constantly wants to move f5, by the way. Why does it love this move so much? If take... Okay. Sure. Bishop e7. Taking here is actually losing because of king to f3. And I guess there's just way too much counterplay, which is why I didn't really want to get involved in it. So rook ab1. Here I should have taken on b2 with the knight, which in retrospect I did see. After takes, queen c2. Hey? Okay, well, I mean, I'm sorry, but there was no way I was finding that line. No way I find that line. Not, several moves into the future with low time on the clock. So I go knight b4 instead, and I still have an advantage. After a3, knight c6 is the best move. b4. Okay, I should have taken on d1 first. And after queen d1, rook here, queen back to a4. And then... Oh, you can't take because of this. Interesting. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. I also get more control over d4. I chose cb4, not the best move. c5, which is not a great move. I have to take it, really. ab4. Here, I blunder. I should have again taken. You can't take because of take. After rook d1, yeah, I don't know why I didn't consider that option. Just forcing the rook away. But bishop e7. Here, knight d6 is played, which is okay. The best move was the move b5, which is what I was more scared of. Knight d6, bishop d6, ed6, and queen a6. Basically the only move in the position. So I'm very happy I found it. The problem was, I wanted to go king b8, but I'm losing after b5, knight a5, rook a1, and my knight just has no moves. Simply has no moves. So I have to go for the queen trade, hitting the queen, hitting the knight. The computer actually likes queen c2, defending the knight and avoiding the queen trade, but here I can play like queen b5 maybe, just blocking up the b pawn. And if knight c3, queen c4, now if b5, knight a5, I have to move b6 to defend my knight, whereas previously my queen was on that square. But queen a6, take, rook d to c1. Oh, here I could have just done this. Oh, yeah, that makes way more sense. And if this, take here, yeah, king b7, and I'm perfectly fine. If b5, I have ab5, and you can't take, so take. So I go king d7. I have like 30 seconds, so, And my opponent like only has one move here, by the way, to not be completely losing, which is rook a1. Which makes sense, because the only way to defend the pawn is knight b8, but that blunders rook c7. So b5 is chosen, which, by the way, looked like the most natural move. But after take, rook b8 is the best move, stopping any infiltration. Rook bc5, and I can just defend. And like I said, if I get the rooks over here, then I'm good. Knight c3. Rook b2 check is the best move, but knight d4 is also the best move. Knight a4. Rook c5, knight c5, king d6. Okay, this king walk was the best idea. And don't get me wrong, this was terrifying. But I calculated, well, knight e2, I just have this. Now, if I go back, my opponent will repeat. And if I go back, my opponent will repeat in some manner, or maybe go rook d1. And I don't want a repetition. I want to win this, because I know I'm better, because I'm up 3 pawns. So I have to venture in. But the important part is there is no rook d1 because of this. And also, if knight to e2, hitting both, after king d3, if take then take, there is again no rook d1 because of this. And you're completely losing as white. So my opponent went knight c5, king d2, rook a1, e2, okay, is the best move, awesome. If check, I was just going to go knight c2, and you have no way of stopping the promotion. If knight e4, amongst other moves, I can go king to e3. And if takes, then I can promote to a queen or even promote to a knight and just win the rook, which, to be honest, I think I would have promoted to a knight because it would have made the conversion easier. But king f2, rook b2, knight e4 check, king d3, knight c5, king c4, knight e4, and then we promote because the king is in double check, and when you are double checked, the king has to move because we're attacking you from 2 different angles. Meaning you have to take this queen, and then knight c2 secures the game. King d1, knight a1. Then knight has no forks on my king, and we are up a clean rook and 2 pawns. So my opponent resigns. Another great Caro Kann game. Now, as I was mentioning earlier in the video with this setup with f4 and later the move h3, I will link this video up here where this kind of structure also happened. You may have already seen that video, but it is a good video. If you have already seen that video, then check out the playlist down here, which has all of my previous episodes of the speedrun, and make sure you check that out, because I guarantee there's some that you haven't seen already. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in one of those videos.